All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Great show for you this week. Before we get into who the guest is, though, I'd like to take just a quick second to say, please go follow the show on iTunes. They switched it from subscribe to follow. Same, I think, goes for Spotify, Google, everywhere you get your podcasts. Super easy. Just go follow. Please leave a review as well. It really helps the show. And I know I probably say this all the time, but it really does. So if you do that, I would deeply, deeply appreciate it. And if you want to stay up to tune with everything that's happening on the show, any updates, any future episodes, all the stuff all the backlog I'm putting up on YouTube, go follow me on Twitter or Instagram. I would really appreciate that. And you can get, all the updates there. As far as the guest this week, super interesting show. Bill Ottman, the founder and CEO of Minds.com. Minds.com is a social media platform that is quite different from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc., big tech. They are open source or open code, I guess. Essentially, all their code is out there. They're not hiding anything. They are decentralized, and they offer some sort of a revenue share for their biggest earners, the people who get the most engagement. So it's a bit of a different way to do things. They don't go around snooping in your messages and your personal data. They don't sell it off to advertisers. They are privacy driven, unlike everything we know about social media these days. And Bill and I have a really fascinating conversation. We touch upon everything from privacy, censorship, network effects on social media, accountability, deplatforming, just a whole range of topics that are in and around social media. And for me, this is one of the most important conversations right now. We're all using social media, and we all either know or feel some of the effects that come with social media, both positive and negative. So I think it's a very important conversation to have. I was really glad Bill could come on and just really get into the nuts and bolts of this topic. So let's jump right into the episode. Without further ado, let me introduce this week's guest, Bill Ottman. Enjoy the episode, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
How you doing, Bill?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure. Very interesting what you're doing. I'm glad you could come on and we could have a discussion. This seems to, there's nothing bigger than social media. Maybe tell me a little bit about yourself, about what Minds is. We can kind of get right into it.
Yeah, my name's Bill, co-founder of Minds.com, also apps. We are an open source crypto social network. So, the functionality feels similar to social media apps that are more mainstream, but our key differences are that everything is totally transparent. So we show all of our code and algorithms. Anyone can actually take our code, make their own app. Everything's encrypted end to end. So we don't even want access to people's data.
Yeah.
I don't want to look in your messages. I don't know why these companies insist on being able to read people's private messages. I don't. And, then we have this whole monetization system for creators, both crypto and cash or your local currency through Stripe. And, we're trying to decentralize our infrastructure. We just care about the community, and we're trying to be more democratic and accessible and more human. And so that's kind of the gist.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. What were you doing before you started Minds?
I've been doing it forever, man. I've been doing it since...
I was born into Minds.
I've been doing it since college, basically. But mine sort of started as a live event platform.
Okay.
We would do these, it was called Gathering of the Minds. And we would do these forums, sort of like a mixture between a forum, an open mic, and like a festival. So we would do shows, but we would also do these debates. And like we did one at UVM where I went to college, talking all about how the university was invested in all of these weapons manufacturers, and sort of had a big debate about that. And then did some live music after. And, I love live events. I worked at Gathering of the Vibes Music Festival for a while, which is a really big one in Connecticut. And, I just love bringing people together. And I just have always been fascinated by the power of crowds. And, ultimately live events are also a nightmare and really hard to scale.
Yeah.
And so I was very anti social media when it first started coming out, like in the early 2000s. And I didn't really want any part of it. I was sort of, crunchy up in Vermont, just like hanging out in the woods. And I just didn't like the effect that it was having on people. And I just didn't trust it at all from the start. Mm-hmm. But, then I sort of realized that the internet, I just started to understand the power of the internet, and that there was sort of like ethical, open source internet, and then proprietary, closed source surveillance internet. Mm-hmm. And that those were sort of at war, and that I just felt the necessity to jump into the ring.
Yeah.
And so we just decided to move the whole thing to the internet. But we do events still. Like we did one a couple of years ago in Philly and like sold it out. I want the app to facilitate more live connections. So we're going to be building more of that functionality. And like that, to be honest, that's one of the things I like about dating apps, or liked before I got married. Because they facilitate people meeting. And I think that that's actually a beautiful thing. And, the point isn't to just be on it. The point is to get off it. So, I respect that.
So you threw around a lot of words that I don't know if the average person really understands, which is what I maybe want to unpack a little bit. Why is open source needed? I mean, if you're a private company, right, I think a lot of companies want to, or at least that's been the case up until maybe a couple of years ago, where everyone wants to guard all their intellectual property information, right, all their process. Why is open source, open code? Why do you guys do that? And why do you think it's important?
I compare it to food.
Okay.
So, in the last decade or two, food transparency has become a really big deal. Organic labels, all that stuff. Everybody's obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. But, there was a time when people didn't care or they just didn't know. And so, they figured, Folgers coffee. Sure. I'm not going to have any concern for what was sprayed on it or any of that kind of stuff, where it came from. So I feel like the same thing is happening with apps, and people are going to start wanting to know what's going on. Like and labels, I mean, licenses sort of are labels. So when I talk about open source, I mean, like, what's the license of the code? Is it accessible? Can I inspect it? Can security auditors inspect it? And, it's not as if any normal person's going to go inspect the code. That's no one expects that. Just in the same way that you're not going to go and, do a chemical analysis of your oatmeal.
Yeah.
But you still, it makes you feel good to see that label on it. You feel like, okay, this is more healthy for me. And so I hope and I want the same thing to happen in app stores, and for when people visit websites to just be more cognizant of that. And so now, the stamp that exists, I mean, there's not like an official like open source stamp, because there's all of these different licenses that you can use. But typically what I'll do is, like, if I visit a website, if you just scroll down to the footer,
yeah,
and see if there's a link to the code, or, you'll see this little like cat sort of icon that indicates GitHub, which a lot of sites will link to their GitHub, which sort of indicates that they're open source. Not always, sometimes parts are open source, but typically the sites that care about this kind of transparency will make it known in the footer. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. So you guys are the organic, non-GMO, locally sourced version of social media.
That's what we're going for. Yeah.
I like that analogy. All right, so let's tackle another one. Decentralization. I see that everywhere now. It seems to be it's kind of like where you have the farm fresh. When you see on the food, you see farm fresh, but it doesn't really mean anything. Right. What does decentralization mean? And is again, it's one of those things where if everyone uses it, it means nothing. But right. I don't know, like in this specific thing, what does it mean?
Well, that's a really good point. Yeah. So you have these labels that people use to sort of honestly try to manipulate you.
Okay.
Things like natural, farm fresh. It means nothing.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean organic. If they were organic, they would be. It would say.
Yeah.
And you would know because they would use that stamp if they could, but they can't. So, some sites you'll visit and it'll say like blockchain or decentralized or open. Open is a very manipulative one.
Okay.
Because sometimes you'll hear sites talking about how they're an open network, but they're not. They don't show their code, or they only show parts of their code. And so, you definitely have to be wary of open. But I guess, I'm not like a decentralization maximalist per se. Like, I do think that ultimately leaning towards decentralization is just better for the internet. I mean, the internet was sort of initially decentralized back in the early days when people would run their own email servers and control their own stuff. And now, so that was sort of Web 1. Mm-hmm. And then we went into Web 2.0, which was these silos, Facebook, Google, sort of handling everything. And now we're moving sort of full circle back, but more modernized, what's called Web 3. And it's just this idea that, you control your identity, you control your data. Servers, you may run a node of some sort, or your phone may be supporting the network. You control your crypto keys. These are all sort of different elements of decentralization. With a social network, it's really hard to be fully decentralized because there's so many features. You got to deal with video and you got to deal with just lots of heavy media, which is not easy to be sort of scattered. Like, that's why central servers like AWS are useful. So I'm not like anti-servers, because you can do really powerful, interesting things with servers, central servers. But you don't want to be reliant on that central server. So like we have like a multi-cloud system. So like, for instance, if Amazon said, you guys are done, it wouldn't matter to us. We're multi-cloud. So we're not relying on any particular cloud, which is sort of another type of decentralization.
I see. Why is there such a scenario? I guess they did that to Parler, right? AWS. They're like, we're not going to host you on our stuff anymore.
Yeah. So sorry, this blight is killing me right now.
No worries.
But yeah, so they did that to Parler. Now, granted, I heard in a couple articles that they were ignoring requests from AWS, and so it wasn't just like completely out of nowhere.
I see.
But that being said, it's still really scary precedent for that kind of thing to happen, regardless of what you believe politically. And so, that's after that is when we really push the multi-cloud stuff into high gear, which most networks are not even capable of doing, because it really depends what type of database you're using. We use something called Cassandra, which is sort of decentralized. It's permissioned. So like there's a spectrum of decentralization, meaning like, in Bitcoin, anyone can run, a node or mine, and they don't need permission. They can just do it and they can participate. With something like Cassandra, which is our backend database, like it can be on different servers all over the world, which is sort of like decentralized, but at least not yet. We're trying to move towards this, but we have to sort of control those nodes. Otherwise someone could attack the network. But then
a node is what for the non-technical person?
A node is a computer that runs a program that participates in the network. So, everyone's bugging about crypto these days. So, when people like in Bitcoin, you can either run a node, which is basically just a copy of the ledger of transactions. That's what blockchains are. It's a distributed ledger. So you have all these computers all over the world that process transactions and keep a copy of the ledger. It's not that complicated. And then so you have nodes that have a copy of the ledger, and then you have miners, which are actually processing blocks and earning Bitcoin for doing so, and sort of like solving this puzzle. And so like whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever else, you can run a node and you can earn, and you can stake your crypto into that node. Again, I'm probably losing people because it gets a little complicated. But the point being that when more people can when anyone can run a node, the network is just more decentralized and more powerful and can't get taken down.
Yeah. Well, I think people are, and I'm including myself in this, fascinated by crypto. It's obviously it's in the news. Obviously, people are talking about all these new millionaires, and that's something that always fascinates people. Oh, wait, I can be a millionaire in a year if I just put, $500 into a SHIB or whatever, this new bonfire or whatever new tokens out there, right? There's like,
no, not those.
There's 100 new ones that are coming out every day, but there is this kind of a learning curve. There's a lot of technical usage of words. There's a lot of different things, and there's definitely a learning curve. Like my friend, he's mining. Was it? I think it was Chia that he was telling me, and I have another friend, and so like people are into this, and,
right?
I think, but if you try to talk to someone over, I don't know, 40 or 50 maybe, and try to explain them to this, you realize when I try to explain this, like to my parents, for example, I realize I actually don't know it that well. It's not that he doesn't, like they don't understand, that's regardless. But when I explain, I'm like, oh, okay, I actually don't know this as well as I thought.
That's a really good point. Yeah. When you try to educate people, that's when you realize how much you know.
Exactly.
Because, and then you sort of realize that you start cutting corners, but they don't notice.
So
but
true.
Yeah, I mean, look, like meme coins, dog coins, that is a casino. That is, it's just like, don't think that you're part of any revolution by participating in that stuff. Can you make money? Yes. Will you most likely lose money? Yes. I think that the dog coins and whatnot, to me, are very different from things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are powering a lot of the dog coins, to be honest. I mean, Doge was like a fork. It's basically a fork of Bitcoin or Litecoin, and is like merge mined with it, but it's like totally inflationary. There's millions of new Doge created a day, and which is opposite to the value proposition of Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are, or at least going to be deflationary. So, it's all about the economics. Like you don't want to buy a million of something where there's like millions more getting printed any day, because then you're just getting value. That's what people don't realize. They just think, oh, the meme is powerful enough to transcend the economics. And maybe in some cases it is for a limited period of time. But, like Shiba, for instance, is an Ethereum token. So, you need to go on Uniswap in order to get it. You need to learn how to set up a Web3 wallet like MetaMask. There is a learning curve in terms of getting involved. But like, Ethereum is really powerful. I mean, Ethereum powers the Minds token. It powers a lot of really interesting projects, a lot of total scam projects. But Ethereum's like foundational to decentralized apps. And that's why it's like an incredible thing to support, in my opinion, because it's like, go to the source. Ethereum is like most of the top 100 tokens, I would guess, are Ethereum based or like DeFi tokens.
Yeah.
So, for a project to power that much of the crypto economy, like that's really, really incredible.
Do you see it like, I don't know, 5-10 years from now, whatever it is, because like we said, like there's so many coming out, right? I can't even count. Are we going to get to a point where they're all just going to fizzle out? Or is this the new reality where 100 or 200 or 500 are coming out every week or so? And I don't know, either only the top ones like the Ethereum and Bitcoin and maybe, I don't know, a couple of others are going to,
I think there's definitely going to be more being created because it's going to be easier to create them over time. So, the easier it is to create a token, the more people who are going to, everyone's probably going to want their own token, and most of them are going to be trash, but there might be some interesting ones in there. So
yeah,
I think that it's going to become more ubiquitous, in the same way that NFTs are becoming extremely mainstream. Got some, hey, it's
some guests.
Yeah. Most people have no idea what an NFT is, but they're making them. They're using them. They want it associated with their brand and with their art. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be a ton more trash, but also just there's going to be more volume and more ideas. So there will be more interesting stuff as well.
Yeah. Well, whenever a new technology comes out, there'll always, you'll see a few headlines of, I forget the guy's name, but the guy that sold that NFT for like some insane number. Like, yeah. It was like 160 million or something, some insane number, right? I forget the exact one, but it was insane.
I thought it was like 70 or something.
Yeah, it was a large number.
It was absurd, yeah.
And then, you'll hear stories about people making $5-10 million off of Doge. It's people who put like a couple of thousand. So like whenever those type of stories come out, that I think attracts a whole new crowd. It's like, oh shit, I can make money off this. This is that easy. And I think like majority of them find out that it's actually not that easy. It's actually super difficult. And then maybe if you kind of manage to trickle and make some money off of it, but it's always like it's I don't know what the numbers are, but it's probably like 95.5 or 99.1 or whatever it is. It's most people end up not making much off of it, and then a few somehow manage to do it.
A normal person has extremely low likelihood of coming into the crypto world and suddenly becoming like a prolific trader. Like, don't do that. You're not gonna succeed. If you come in with the intention of just like getting rich in some short-term period, then your chances of succeeding are so much lower. Like, it's a long-term game. You want to be holding. You want to be, focusing on the most open public blockchains. Like, I mean, to me, it's like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And, there's some other interesting projects out there, but you don't want to be trading all the time. Every time you trade, you're creating taxable events. Most people don't even know that that's happening when they're swapping all of these things around. You just want to hold and chill for like a decade.
Yeah.
Like, stop.
All right. So, being an entrepreneur myself, I know how hard it is to start a business. How difficult is it to build a social platform going up against some of the largest behemoths this humankind has ever known, essentially?
Yeah, it's a grind. I mean, been going for like almost, like a decade. And granted, we didn't really roll out our apps until like 2015, 2016. So, it's really hard. It's much harder than it was for them, is the thing. Because for them, there was nothing, okay, there was like MySpace and Friendster, but those were not embedded into culture in the same way that Facebook and Twitter and Google are. So it's harder for companies, for alternatives like us, for that reason. Also because we're not willing to play, dirty surveillance tricks in order to grow. So, they were just like sticking their hands down everybody's pants, basically, to get all the info they could,
so
that they could grow. And so that's this extra burden that we carry. Like, most apps will just put like Google Analytics in, they embed all this nasty code that tracks users so that they can better understand what's happening. And, so there are reasons that people do that, but we are just and like Google Analytics is a really powerful tool, but it is, you are, your company, your website, your app you are becoming Google.
Yeah.
When you put that into your app. And so you're taking this shortcut and you're basically selling out your whole audience. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, like in that it's like intentional or that there's like necessarily malintent. Most people are just like, oh, analytics. Okay. Just toss it in. Give me more insights. But it's darker than that in reality. And so there's starting to be more open source tools, open source analytics, but they're not as advanced.
Yeah.
So it takes longer, but that's okay. I mean, for us, it's more about steady, sustainable growth.
So let me ask you, how do you guys make money if your financial model is essentially flipped, right? It's the opposite of what every other social media platform is doing. I guess, what's your main source of revenue?
Yeah, I mean, so minds.com/plus is, we very much believe in like the membership subscription economy. I think that is a million times more ethical, sustainable. And so what we do is, vast majority of everything on Minds is free, but Minds Plus, the best analogy I can make, because it's a little bit complicated, is it's $5 a month. It's like Netflix, but imagine you could upload to Netflix.
Yeah.
And at the end of the month, if your film performed well, they would pay you out. So that's what Minds Plus is. Minds Plus is an exclusive feed of content that you get access to, like Netflix, but it's not just videos. It's also like blogs and photos and any kind of media, but it's an exclusive feed. And you also get the ability to post into that feed. So, and then what we do is we take 25% of the revenue that we get from Minds Plus, and we proportionally distribute it to the users who post the most popular content in.
So there's a revenue share model that happens.
Exactly. And it's really taking off. We got thousands of members, and so that has been huge for us. We also do, we're not anti-advertising. We're anti-surveillance advertising. So, we do also have revenue from Boost, which is our ad network. And essentially the way it works is on Minds, even just for free without Minds Plus, you earn Minds tokens for receiving engagement and like a handful of other things. And then you can use those tokens to boost your content. One token's worth 1,000 views.
Okay.
So, we accept tokens we only accept tokens for advertising. And you can also buy tokens and then use them. But those are the two ways that we make money.
So how efficient is our ads without the quote unquote the surveillance economy, without doing what all the other social media platforms?
Yeah, they're so not as good. They're not as targeted. We're going to bring in some levels of targeting, like certain categories, which isn't surveillance, because I think people ultimately would prefer, like if you like fishing, you would prefer to get a boost about fishing, as long as you like publicly said, I like fishing and I would prefer boosts that are about fishing. Mm-hmm. It's not like me following you around to the lake through your geolocation.
Yeah.
Being like, hey, do you want to go to this like convenience store that's like happens to be 5 feet away from you? You're like, what the? So
I mean, how embedded, how entrenched is the surveillance? I will look up something on Amazon, right? Running shorts. I like running. Well, I actually don't like running too much, but I do it. And then 2 days later, I will get nonstop ads on Instagram about running shorts. Every other ad will be about running shorts.
Right.
So how are they all in cahoots? Like, how is me looking on Google translating to something on Twitter coming up? How is it me searching something on Amazon translates to...
They are watching if you have those tabs open in the same browser session, I'm pretty sure about this. I'm not 100% of like all the technical details, but Facebook is watching you everywhere in that browser session. So every site you're going to in other tabs, they know. And I think the same works for multiple. So they're all sort of tracking where you're going in other tabs. There's also your geolocation. They deny it, but in terms of like the audio, like what you're saying in the room, who knows the sort of...
Oh, I mean, there's videos. I remember...
No, I know there are. They still deny it, which is shocking. But like, yeah, I've seen all those videos. They deny it still.
Is privacy a major sticking point, do you think, for general population, or is it more techie people understand the mechanisms and the behind the scenes and everything that's happening? I know, like personally, right? I know a lot of people that kind of like the personalized ads, as we mentioned earlier, right. and that the phones and the computers know their wants and their likes, and they actively and they're actively and consciously giving away more of their autonomy to these machines who gradually seem to know them better than they know themselves.
Right. No, yeah. So that's a good framing of it. So I think there's a large group of people who have sort of jumped in and they say, yeah, just show me what I want to see.
Yeah.
Show me the best products. Like, I want everything personalized, and that's okay. I mean, but the thing is that they say that, they've consented, but they didn't actually consent. They gave in.
Yeah.
And they accepted it. There was no option for them to opt in or not. There was no initial question from Facebook saying, hey, do you want us to do this or not? They just, it was unavoidable. And then they just took the stance of, meh, okay, yeah, let's do it. I'm not going to complain about it. And I think that's okay. I mean, I think it's all about consent. Mm-hmm. And additionally, I think that if you're consenting, you should probably be compensated somehow for consenting. Facebook will say, oh, we're giving you the service. So like, that's your compensation. But we all know that they're making way more money than that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, that's basically what I would say. I think that there's a huge group of people who will say, I have nothing to hide. So, whatever, doesn't matter. But that is just like, yeah, you do. Why aren't you live streaming, you taking a shower? What do you mean you have nothing to hide? Everybody has stuff to hide. If you don't, then prove it and start live streaming your whole life. That's what I say to those people. Like, just because and Snowden said it best, you don't want freedom of speech. Like, I'm butchering it. You need freedom of speech, even if you don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
So you need privacy, even if you have nothing to hide. It's like the principle still matters. So yeah, but anyway, next time you hear someone say, I have nothing to hide, so I don't care, like, then ask them why they don't live stream themselves on the toilet.
Shower. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no one wants to watch that, but yeah. But it's kind of like an analogy like you made earlier about food, right? There are organic options, non-GMO options. There are less sugar options, more protein, less all the healthy stuff is available, and it's, food science is getting better. We're kind of like going back to our quote unquote roots, where we're trying to eat healthier, but you still have huge numbers of people that are eating high fructose corn syrup, and they're eating, I don't know, red meat, and they're eating whatever, dairy, whatever it is that's still considered unhealthy, just because it's tasty, or just because it's cheaper, or whatever the reason, just because maybe they didn't take the time to educate themselves about what a healthy diet consists of. And I'm pretty sure this is a very similar way, right? You have people who are educated in tech, and they really know the ins and outs, and they will take the time to, I don't know, maybe use Brave instead of Chrome, or DuckDuckGo instead of Google search, and you guys instead of Twitter. And then majority of people, I don't know if they're gonna, I mean, and maybe they will, maybe this will take time, because technology is so embedded into our day-to-day now. We're like half robots essentially. Maybe in 10 years or whatever it is, it'll happen. But I just don't know if like most people will take the time to do the research.
No, they won't. It just has to happen.
Yeah.
But I think we have made, over the last 10 years, a lot of progress, like massive. I mean, the fact that, like, you even mentioned Brave and DuckDuckGo, and, people are using Minds more. 10 years ago, that was there was no privacy browser or search engine. And, these things take decades. It's probably going to take 20 years, until it's so ubiquitous that, because most people aren't even going to choose the alternative if the alternative exists. There's a group of people who will, but for the mainstream critical mass to really get in, the privacy stuff, the digital rights stuff, the crypto, decentralization, open source, all that needs to be just under the hood. Mm-hmm. The product itself has to do the work. It has to provide value to somebody who knows nothing about technology. And that's honestly why we've been focusing so much on the monetization, because everybody wants reach. They want more people to see their content, and they want to make money.
Yeah.
And, if they can, stick it to the social media overlords, they probably will. I think most people know that it's sketchy. They just don't care enough. So, in the fact that the big networks are suppressing everybody's reach, they're censoring, even if you don't care about censorship, the teenager who's like posting selfies on Instagram, what does she care about? Her likes. If she's not getting the likes, then she's like depressed, which is sort of a whole issue in and of itself, but we've committed we're never going to interfere with people's news feeds. So you always have 100% reach, which is so key, because once the feed starts to become just like a hidden sort of chaotic stream of, you don't know why you're getting what you're getting, there's no logic to it, it's all behind the scenes algorithms, that's when they are literally engineering the way that you think. Mm-hmm. And they're punishing certain people, and that's just not a fair playing field.
Well, you have network effects, right? Which I see it as a kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have, let's take Instagram as an example. You have about 1 billion users, which is great because any creator can potentially be seen by 1 billion people, right? Potentially. On the flip side is, because there are 1 billion people, that makes it extremely difficult for you to be seen. And the reality is only a small, a few percent of people actually reach the masses based on whatever Instagram's algorithm decides. And I've noticed this. I remember, maybe a couple of years ago, I would have pretty decent numbers on stories, on likes. They did something to their algorithm a year or two ago, and those numbers just dropped by half. Now, there's no explanation. There's no telling you not telling you what you can do to improve that. It's just, that's what it is. That's just how it is.
Yeah, just accept it.
Yeah. No,
it's sad. And, people work so hard on building up these pages, and then they just get screwed again and again. It's just going to keep happening. So, you got to back up your situation. You got to protect yourself. And that's why diversity matters. And, people say, I don't have time for another social platform, blah, blah, blah. But you better have time to protect yourself. So however you figure out to do that so that your audience doesn't get stripped from you, figure it out. Otherwise, you can't really, no one's going to feel bad for you. So it's a tough situation, because the problem is that these platforms are so big, everybody's there, they work great, they have amazing functionality, amazing developers, geniuses working there. They, just buy out all the best talent. So it's really not easy. But the good news is that crypto, Web3 is exploding, and actually the best developers in the world are starting to want to not be at big tech, because they know what they're contributing to. They would much rather contribute to open source. Think about it, if you're a programmer. You code for Google or Facebook, no one sees anything you did. You're contributing, you know what you're contributing to. But in crypto and open source and places like Minds, everyone can see your code. You get to show it off. It gets used. You're contributing to something that matters. You're still making money. Maybe it's not quite at the level, but there have been some really interesting studies about motivation and sort of mental health at work. And it's been proven. I think Atlassian participated in a study about open source and creativity in the workplace. And it was shown that people are just so much more motivated and happy when they know that their work is going to be seen.
Yeah.
And so that's just a really big deal. I mean, the fact that all this energy is coming into crypto, which is liberating people all over the world, I don't think that I think the most likely scenario is honestly that we start to see Google and Facebook and Twitter dabble in crypto. And that, I heard that Instagram's rolling out an NFT situation. Dorsey at Twitter's constantly talking about Bitcoin. They're gonna get into it. Facebook's rolling out DM, which is like a stable coin. So they get it. Which is good news. We want the pressure to be so severe that even big tech changes. We don't like, because unfortunately, and like it would be easy for me to say like, oh, I just want them all to fail. But I actually don't necessarily, because
necessarily,
in maybe some part of me, but I want them to fail at what they're doing now. But I'm not saying I need them to be like wiped from the face of the earth.
You
like,
want them to course correct.
Yeah, course correct. That helps everybody.
Yeah.
For the last decade, we've been having to, in a big way, reinvent the wheel, because none of them are open source. If one of them was open source from the beginning, we would have built with them. We would have used their code. And then we would be 10 years ahead of where we are now. But instead, we had to, it's like, this is the thing about innovation that I think ultimately is what's so damaging about what they're doing, is that they're literally holding back evolution, in my opinion, because they're restricting access to the technology.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess from their perspective, right? Is it, hey, this is our intellectual property, this is our technology, this is our information. We have the right to keep it to ourselves and advance our shareholders' profit?
Oh, sure. No, yeah. I'm not saying that they're sitting there like, let's blockade human evolution.
Yeah, there's no like mass big conspiracy theory, right? They're all like,
well, there are some. There's probably there's some, probably internal biases, and there's probably some super sketchy stuff going on with the censorship and surveillance. But yeah, I don't think that there's, I don't think Zuckerberg is necessarily like a full-on evil alien. Partially, but
50%.
Again, like, yes, you have the legal right to have intellectual property. But in terms of software patents, it's like you can still. There's sort of this misperception with open source. People try to polarize it. It's like I either keep it all for myself, closed, and like have the competitive edge, or I give everything away. Mm-hmm. But that's actually not how it works. Like, for instance, our license is something called the General Public License, the version 3 of it. And what it means is that anyone can look at our code, use it, commercialize it, do whatever they want, change it, but they have to share the changes that they make with us and with everybody. That is different from like public domain or a full out open source license like the Apache or MIT license, wherein anyone can take the code and do whatever they want with it and they don't have to share their changes. So we've actually taken a unique license in that. Well, it's not unique. I mean, it's a super common license, but there are, our software is actually technically called free software, not open source, but they get blended together and there's sort of, the definitions are a rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah.
But there are like Uniswap, for instance, which is a decentralized crypto exchange. They're rolling out this new license, which is a time-delayed GPL, General Public License, where no one can fork their project for 2 years so that they maintain that competitive edge for 2 years. People can still build on top of them, but they're saying no one can completely take our code and try to compete with us for 2 years. But after that, anyone can.
Well, that makes sense.
So, that makes sense. Yeah. It's like it's a middle ground where they're still being transparent. So everyone can still read the code and make sure it's not doing anything sketchy. But, they want to make sure that some juggernaut beast doesn't come through and completely screw them over. So there's variations. And this is what's really important to, understand that there's just more nuance. It's not like just, free love versus like, total lockdown.
Yeah. Well, the other crazy part is the whole censorship issue that is currently happening on social media, right? And I guess there's no accountability. They can suspend or delete your account. There's no real recourse to getting it back. There's no real explanation. Social media gods decide, and you are on the out. I mean, even look at Trump, right? He was literally the president of the U.S., and I have not heard from him in a very long time. Like, he's essentially dead for all I know. Like, he used to be, all his tweets, they used to, I mean, that's what the press, that's what they make their money off. He would tweet, they would make a whole article about it. They would get clicks. Like, it was very lively in those 4 years, for good or bad. But the media made a shit ton of money. It was probably their most successful 4 years because not a lot of people trust them anyway. But that's a whole other issue. But what I'm saying is, if you look at just an example, they suspended him, right? They didn't suspend Khomeini, which is the spiritual leader in Iran, for saying that you should wipe the Jews off the planet. He's still on Twitter. He's active. Trump, for whatever he said, is not active, right? So I don't know what is the barometer, how they decide, but it just seems like very slanted towards one side of the political aisle. Do you guys have any censorship? Because even, it's just something that I told the line, I don't know. There has to be some, right? Like, even HN and Parler, they have, I think they said some censorship. Like, they don't allow.
Parler probably has more than us.
Really?
But
where do you toe the line? I guess that's the question.
We try to stick to the First Amendment. But there are certain cases of like maliciousness, and certainly with like spam, and there are some exceptions where we're not going to wait for like a court order to take it down. So it's not like we just it's absolutely like there are terms. And we have like really sophisticated, like, censorship is a spectrum as well. Mm-hmm. You've got all the NSFW, not safe for work content, explicit content, which we do allow, but we have pretty sophisticated filterings for it. So you can opt in and like not see that kind of stuff. But I mean, I think generally, you just don't want to be injecting yourself into these sort of these debates. Like, we're not experts on medical health or various issues like misinformation. The problem is that misinformation is a problem, but it's also a problem when you censor people for being wrong. I mean, because misinformation, is essentially just if someone's wrong. Yeah. So what, you're saying you can't just be wrong? You can't, like, if I say, tomatoes are, candy. Or, I don't know, if a microphone is food.
Yeah.
That is that's misinformation.
You're getting canceled.
So, and it actually gets to that point, like, where if I said something about like COVID is X, it would probably show up in some filter. And so that's just totally unproductive. It does nothing. It makes everybody pissed off and think that they're victims. And, there's all this research that censorship amplifies violence and extremism, which is what we believe. And it does in the long term. So, the inconsistency of Trump getting banned and like the leaders of Iran still being there. Like, I was reading the Facebook Oversight Board decision on, because they sort of said, okay, Trump's still banned for 6 more months from Facebook as well. And one of the quotes that they said was the reason was like, "We love you all." And, because he was talking to the protesters.
Yeah.
But there's something kind of sick about that they said that his incitement was saying, we love you all, when, all these people were coming to DC, some of whom, were crazy, but others who were just like going to DC to like support him.
Yeah.
I didn't vote for him. I'm not a Trump guy. I think that he has all kinds of mental issues, but I absolutely do not think that he should have been banned. Mm-hmm. And it's total hypocrisy, and it's just a weird game. But like, yeah, you're right that you really haven't heard from him. I do think he's kind of staying under the radar. He could be pushing harder to get himself into the media.
I think he's dying. I think he's such a narcissist. He loved the attention that he got on Twitter. I think for him not to get that attention that he used to get daily is probably like the equivalent of like stopping, smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol every day. He's probably like relapsing or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because there's some research that shows that censorship will, creates the Streisand effect where, someone gets banned and then they actually end up getting more attention.
Yeah.
But in some case, like censorship also can work in isolated scenarios. So, he is being drowned out. He has been canceled from the big networks. And, I don't know. It's hard to say. I do sort of think that if he really wanted to get himself back in, he could. But like his whole social media platform that he rolled out, it's not even a social media platform. It's just like a blog. It's like,
I think he's on Telegram.
Yeah, no, look, yeah, he's certain places, but what they've done is just polarized people. Yeah. I mean, because now
he was not net positive overall as a president.
Oh no. But but the division that has now been created because all of his supporters were so alienated, and now they're over in this segregated world, and like, the aristocracy is over on Twitter. Like, that's just who could really say that is a healthier world? I just, yes, there's toxicity that comes when, the debate is raging, but, people are getting further separated when they're not talking in the same reality.
Do you see, well, I mean, this is very dystopian, but do you see a situation where Twitter becomes, a place for the left to talk, and anyone that has differing political ideas gets canceled, gets banned? And then these, like you said, like other social platforms pop up, maybe you, maybe Parler, maybe some others. And then all the people who are maybe conservative or Republican or libertarians, they go and talk there. And then before you had echo chambers, right, on Twitter, where now it's not even echo chambers, it's completely different platforms having completely different conversations, just causing a further rift between the people of the US or the world.
I hope that doesn't happen. I am going to do everything I can to make sure it doesn't. I mean, we're non-political. Our original waves of growth were from both sides of the aisle. We've never really taken a political stance from the top down. It's sort of sad that free speech has become political, but we're not really going to accept that it is. And I think the mistake, whether you're Twitter or your Parler, is getting political. Mm-hmm. And you're just losing rational people's trust in you. So things probably will move more in that direction over time, but I don't think that it's just going to become a place where, I don't think people on the left or right only want to talk to themselves. Maybe a minority of them. But yeah, some, but I think that there's a majority of people who are sort of quiet but more balanced. There's been some research I've seen that there's such a small percentage of the users on Twitter or any social platform who are actually, the loudest in getting the most engagement.
Yeah, the vocal minority.
Yeah. So, we rage on, and I just hope that these big platforms are honestly looking at the information, because, for them, censorship's not a good business model. I mean, you're losing half of your potential customer base.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I think there's all these PR reasons that they're caving right now, I do think that there's a future world where they start to realize that, wait a second, why are we doing this? We have to compete. We have to appeal to more customers. Like, do we care if they like Trump or not? I mean, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I don't see any signs of that right now, but from like just a raw numbers perspective, you would think that would have to be a conversation. Someone in the room you would think say that.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, we'll end on a quote that I'm taking from you, which I thought was very good and very apropos for this. The ugliness of ignorant ideas is beautiful compared to the horror of everyone's mouth sewn shut. That's beautiful. Where'd you get that from?
That was a late night inspiration. Yeah, I think that type of grounding is really important for people to remember, because we sort of get in these trances. Yeah. But then you need to keep everything in context. I mean, people in the US particularly don't understand what true authoritarian regimes are like and what it's like. Imagine living in North Korea and, how lucky those people would feel to even be able to access the opinions of crazy people. But they just don't even have the option. So, yeah, got to keep. I want to find an illustrator who can do a drawing of that quote, because
that'll be sick.
Yeah, people just are in a bubble and not understanding history and the dangers of what's going on right now. Like, literally, billions of people's access to information is in the hands of probably 10 people who, control these filters and these algorithms. I don't know about that number, but it's a very small number of people. But, I guess the last thing I would say is that I think that one thing that can unify people is this idea of freedom of information. Because free speech is so polarizing, very political now, which is sad. But freedom of information is something that doesn't really get talked about. And most people, I think, would agree that we need more information from our government and from corporations. But even particularly just with government, I mean, with all of the conspiracy theories and scandals, I would think that both Democrats and Republicans want to know what's going on with Epstein. Mm-hmm. Can we get information about that? That'd be nice. What's going on with all this UFO stuff? I would think that Democrats and Republicans both want to know what's going on there. All of this classified.
Even now with the Wuhan virus, they were saying a year ago was a complete conspiracy theory. Now there's actual evidence that it did come out of a lab.
Right. It's same exact thing. So, again, that is an issue of access to information, which you're seeing people from both sides agree on. So I'm actually shifting a lot towards talking more about Freedom of Information, Freedom of Information Act, Freedom of Information Act reform. These are the kinds of things that people agree on. And, those are I was watching, do you ever watch the Rising on the Hill with Cigar and Crystal Ball?
What's that? No.
It's a news program where, and then they talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're a good example of where we could go, because it's a Democrat and Republican, and they're talking about Epstein and UFOs all the time. That's where I think we want to be, and if we keep doing that, then I think we'll get to a better place.
Yeah, it would be good if politics has become more than religion in a way. It's so divisive, and you're either with this group or with that group. And if that group believes in A, I'm going to believe in X. It's almost like it doesn't matter what I believe. I'm just going to believe the opposite of what they believe. And It's become so divisive. I wish you would have more, Fox, like they should have both people, Democrats and Republicans. CNN should have both Republicans and Democrats. Like all of them should have a mix rather than just catering to their audience, which I guess, it makes sense because that's how you get ratings. But I just feel like a more nuanced conversation that could happen on both. I don't know, not seeing the other as other, but seeing them as, hey, let's see what they have to say. Let's find a common ground rather than no, they're gone. Like we can't talk to them, and that's happening on both sides.
Yeah,
Fortunately.
Yeah, it is. But certain topics, quite honestly, with full access to information, aren't even necessarily up for debate, because there are certain facts that we don't even have access to, so we can't even have an informed opinion, and so it becomes this political battle. And certain topics, there's no amount of information that's ever going to stop the debate. Mm-hmm. But other topics, you can just have truth come out. And then everyone's like, oh, okay, we're not going to fight anymore because this is what is the fact.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, man, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was awesome. Usually I'll do a plug, all the social media platforms, but I'm assuming you're only on Minds, right?
I am. Yeah. So minds.com/Ottman, Ottman. Hit me up. We just launched a new encrypted chat feature. So feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Yeah, guys, go check it out. Bill, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming, and I had a blast talking with you.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. Bye.